This week on Just Solutions. The climate crisis is playing out this summer with record heat, drought and wildfires raging across much of the American West. While everybody is impacted, people of colour are disproportionately bearing the brunt. A new report says that Latinx people are twice as likely to live in the areas most exposed to wildfires as the rest of the population. Today's guest is Felipe Benítez, the Executive Director of Corazón Latino, a national non-profit that seeks to generate social, environmental and conservation initiatives that foster natural resource stewardship. From Free Speech TV, Just Solutions. Felipe, it's good to have you with us. There's a lot to dig into now. The climate crisis is no longer an abstract concept, really for anybody, but as we're going to explore, for people of colour and for many often the Latinx communities, they are living through the worst of the impacts right now. Pretty much everybody in the country is suffering from air quality issues as a result of the wildfires. But this report by a climate analysis group, RiskQ, says that Latino residents in Western states face the greatest risk. And of course, it's no surprise to understand that there is an intersection between racism, poverty, and the detrimental impacts of the climate crisis. You've been working on this for a long time and also around environmental stewardship. And we'll talk about that as part of the solutions that are emerging. But what's your sense in terms of how Latino communities are really bearing the brunt of these climate issues right now?
Well, thanks. First of all, thank you for having me today. And I'm joining you today from Phoenix, Arizona, which is ground zero this summer of the climate crisis. We had, last summer, we had in Arizona, there was a record number of 100 plus days of heat. Here in the past few weeks, we have record temperatures, all-time record temperatures, 115, 116 degrees in Arizona, someplace in California were even worse. And guess what? That's where our communities live. That's where they work. That's where they are, whether during construction, professional, agriculture, we are bearing the consequences of this extreme heat. And there's people's health is suffering because of this. The pockets, we are, as energy costs go up, we are the ones with the biggest burden. And even talking about migrant community, record number of deaths in the border because of this heat wave. And you put on top of that, and this is just in Arizona, but we have floods, we have hurricanes, we have droughts, we have all kinds of extreme weather events that are affecting our communities, and we don't have the option of moving. We don't have the option of going somewhere we need to live, and it's just on the one hand it's hurting, but it's also an opportunity to really make a meaningful change. So, and if we talk, you mentioned healthcare. Well, there's a concept called tree equity, that those communities that have more access to tree canopy are usually healthier. They have longer life expectancy. Their health costs are lower. Where unfortunately, communities, neighborhoods, whether it's LA, Phoenix, in New York, that have less tree canopy is where, or the less affluent neighborhoods, that's where our communities live. So there's a direct, immediate, long-term and health disproportionate effects that we're suffering, that we're encountering as part of our communities. And it's not only Latino, it's communities of color.
Well, let's dig in a little bit more to that, because when we see statistics like communities of colour are more likely to be impacted by poor air quality, this is every year it seems the American Lung Association identifies this as part of their State of the Air reports. But why this is, because as you said, there are very often overrepresentation of immigrant communities, people of colour in some of these industries that are at the front line of this. Maybe agriculture, landscaping, service work, where they're working already in an extreme heat. But then you also look at where these communities live and the environmental racism that often plays out, living already with air pollution, but also living in accommodation that doesn't have air conditioning, that doesn't have a tree canopy. You can see how we're seeing record numbers of deaths because of the record heat, for instance, that we've been experiencing. I mean, give us a sense of that the people's jobs and where people live play such a huge role in this when we are seeing such tangible impacts of the climate crisis.
I mean, the differences are staggering. If you go even zip code by zip code in places like LA, like Arizona, where you can measure the median income and access to trees, access to all these elements. I mean, the life expectancy from a neighborhood to another would be built very, in a way, the cost of premiums for healthcare. I mean, there's all these elements that, as you mentioned, are part of a systemic racist system that keeps our communities suffering the most. I mean, we don't have access to affordable housing. We don't have access to green spaces. We don't have access to appropriate healthcare. So obviously, we get isolated and we end up living in these neighborhoods that are in the better, making a broad generalization, that might be next to polluted sites, they might be next to industry, because that's where we can afford living. And that needs to change, and we're changing it. I mean, I don't want it to put us as victims, but that's the reality that we're living, and we need to recognize it, and we need to take the steps to solve it. I mean, you see it, for example, here, I've been spending a few weeks here in Phoenix, and I mean, the only time where it's safe for construction workers, for landscapers to work, it's from 5 a.m. to probably 8 a.m. and then in the afternoon, and that goes into doing exercise, having a healthy life. And our communities are the ones that are keeping, let's put it this way, keeping our community going, even through the pandemic. The frontline workers, the essential workers, that's our community. Those are the ones that are showing up, even with this COVID and having the highest COVID rates and deaths. We are there. We are making sure that we are keeping our role, our part of the economy, and providing for everybody to have all the amenities and all that we need. So this needs to change. I mean, I'm encouraged. I mean, I as I mentioned, I'm obviously this is urgent. We need to do something, but I'm encouraged that there's still time to do things. And I think with the right combination of political will, grassroots action, and investment, we can start breaking this vicious cycle.
We'll talk more about some of what that action could look like, but just to, really emphasize how these communities often don't have the same access, even to advocating for themselves, to pay for attorneys to fight if a large industrial complex or something is proposed close to them. That happened in Colorado. There was a widely publicized and reported on case of a fracking site that was proposed to be put beside a school in a more affluent part of a town in northern Colorado. Parents in that district were able to mobilize, advocate, and that fracking site was moved right beside the school that had the highest level of students of color, Latinx students, and students living in poverty. Parents and communities in these areas don't always have the same political agency. So when we talk about organizing, that looks very different from, say, an affluent community in Los Angeles to, say, a predominantly immigrant community, maybe in Arizona.
Yeah, no, and I mean, that's access to decision makers. One of my mentors taught me once, there's two ways that politicians, elected officials, will listen to you. If you with the power of your vote or the power of money. Unfortunately, on the power of money, we don't have that access. Our communities, I mean, we can strive and we can make changes, but it's the power of our vote. We're constituents. We are employing them. So the more our communities stand up, we empower our communities. We encourage them to participate, to make their voices heard the same way that affluent community is doing. That's how we're gonna get our priorities taken care of. At the end of the day, no matter if you have $1 million in the account or you're living paycheck by paycheck, your vote counts the same. And that's the great equalizer. So for us, it's a two-way approach. Is yes, let's raise our voices. Let's make sure that those who are eligible, who can vote, register to vote, participate not only in federal presidential elections, but in school boards, in council members, every elected official level, because that's how we build our political power. And that's how we have a seat at the table. If they don't invite us, we show up, we create our table. But that's the only way to do it is through mobilizing. And it's a labor of love. I mean, it's not immediate. It takes time. We're talking about families, at least with the Latino and immigrant community, it might be mixed status, that may be afraid, and it's understandable. But at the same time, we need to make sure that they have the information, that they have the knowledge, and that we give them the tools to speak up for themselves. Another thing that it's often seen is that there's organizations, maybe we do that we are claiming to represent the voice of the unheard, of the voiceless. No. Let them talk to an elected official. It's not me in my comfy office if I'm in Arizona or in DC. It's the people from the community that need to pick up the phone, to use social media, to attend public hearings, whatever it takes. That's how real change is done, and that's what Corazón Latino does. We build stewardship in a process where we first ask folks, "Hey, have you seen this park that it's around your community, or this national forest that it's an hour from you?" Like here in Arizona, we have multiple national forests, or any other city. There's always these national lands, public lands that belong to all of us, that we have the ability to enjoy them, but also the power to defend them. And then as we do that, as we ask members of our community to enjoy them, to be part, to benefit from the what nature gives us, then advocate for it. This is important. And when you poll folks, Latino voters and non-voters, about priorities, yes, immigration, jobs are top there, but a clean water, clean air, a better future for your family, it's there. It's even at higher rates. So it is. We are. I've told it in other places, but it is part of our DNA, at least for the Latino community, and for many communities, it's part of our DNA to be carriers of the land, to protect our Madre Tierra, our Mother Earth. So sometimes we just need to activate it, and that's what we're here for.
Well, we did see mobilisation on a massive scale around young voters, voters of colour, Indigenous voters, and we saw what happened in the November elections. We're also seeing the backlash, where we're seeing some voting rights being rolled back, and efforts in states that saw that record turnout trying to roll them back, and in many cases doing that. This is a topic, of course, we've covered, and I think we have to always bear that in mind, that fighting for voting integrity and election integrity and access to the ballot is impacting all of these issues, from healthcare to the climate. But I want to talk a little bit more about the intersection of immigration. You mentioned earlier the crisis at the border and how many people there are really suffering right now because of the heat waves. Of course, the climate crisis is also driving mass migration and refugees as well. It seems like we can't talk about any political policy without really referencing the climate crisis as well. Talk a little bit more about the climate crisis and immigration, and why those two things need to be talked about in tandem.
I mean, they're interconnected, same thing as healthcare, same thing as jobs. It's that intersectionality of all those topics that really create the reality that we're living. If we solve immigration, then we still have to protect our Madre Tierra, and we still need to provide healthcare. So, and to be honest, sometimes we treat it in silos, which is something that we're trying to overcome, but that's part of the design that we've done and the model that we follow, which is not the best one. But yes, I mean, take last year alone, where Central America was hit by two consecutive hurricanes that decimated and destroyed towns in Guatemala and in El Salvador. And obviously, what else is left to you? And I mean, I'm an immigrant. I know what it takes to leave your home country, your homeland, and take that leap of faith to do something, and either by on a plane or by foot, or whatever is the mean of transportation, or whatever is the journey. It's still a journey that takes a toll on all of you. So when you are willing to leave everything behind, when you're willing to risk anything, that any of the challenges, any of the dangers of that journey, just for a better opportunity for you and for your family and for future generations, and and you decide to come and cross the desert in 111 degrees. So that's what it takes. So it's really immigration. It's I see it in a two-pronged way. It's the desire to fulfill your version, if you want to call it, of the American dream of bringing something positive for your family in the future. And the second one is that desperation created by not being able to be able to care for your family in your homeland. And it is a tough decision. I mean, all immigrants, and at the end of the day, everybody except those who from native nations that live here, we're all immigrants, and we all have that. And at some point in the history of our families, that decision was made. So it is important to address it. It's important to provide those individuals the opportunity to be part of this country in an equal way, in a just way, to contribute. And at the same time, we need to make sure that recognize their value to the economic development, to making sure that this country continues to be the leader in a global scale. So again, it is important, if we want to stop migration, undocumented migration, or that, we need to solve the problems. We need to solve the economic, health, violence, climate in the rest of the world. So it's a part of the solution. So again, it's very complex, but I really think that we need to think this in a holistic and complete way. And for those who want to pursue, follow, and be part of the American dream, let them have it. Let us be part. I am an immigrant. I'm building an organization from scratch. I'm creating jobs. I'm helping save Mother Earth. Like me, there's millions of people with the same or more drive than I do, and more talented than I am. We just need sometimes that opportunity to get it right, to do the right thing.
There does seem to be more awareness about the intersectionality of all of these things that we're talking about. And just last year, there was a blueprint that was released, by a US congressional committee, solving the climate crisis, the Congressional Action Plan for a Clean Energy Economy and a Healthy and Just America. I know your organization is part of that, others like Green Latinos, organizations that try to highlight the disproportionate impact on communities of color, people in poverty, of all of these issues. What was that blueprint about, and what do you hope will come out of it?
Well, the reality is that the way to do this is a transition out of fossil fuel. It's clean energy, it's renewable energy, and that infrastructure that comes around it. So right now we have a proposal from the Biden administration. First was the American Jobs Plan, now it's infrastructure, and it has many iterations. But there's that opportunity, because first of all, we have the technology. The technology is there. We renewable energy, solar energy, renewable energy. It's at the cheapest price. It's the cheapest way to generate that dependence or the energy needs. We have the financing. It's a good business to invest in this type of technology. And now we have almost all the political will that we need. We need still a party to really stop just favoring the big capitals or the economic gains of a few, and really think about the whole world, the whole United States, all the people that live in this country. So we have we have the technology, we have access to finance, and we have at least an administration with the political will to do it. So this is the time to do it. So what does that mean? We're going to create jobs, first and most important, because we need to rebuild the infrastructure in this country. We need to bring solar panels to every rooftop in America. We need electric vehicles. We need electric buses in school fleets. And guess who's going to be installing, who's going to be servicing, who's going to be supporting this economy? Communities of color. So it is a fantastic opportunity to both save our Madre Tierra, protect the future of our families, and at the same time create prosperity for our communities. So this is it. I mean, all the scientific consensus that we have less than 10 years to make those changes, maybe less. But I want to see it in a positive way. We still have time. We can still do it, and now is the time. It's a matter of stepping up, of making our voices heard. And no matter if you're blue, red, purple, whatever, this is the time to ask, to demand, to your elected officials that the time is now. We won't have another opportunity like we have it right now. And the reconciliation process in Congress and all these complicated processes. But if the money is there, if the willingness to do it, we're gonna make those changes, and we're gonna lead the world in protecting and at least not making this crisis even worse than it is now.
At the core of your work at Corazón Latino is really fostering environmental stewardship and encouraging Latinx communities to really participate in that. It does seem that leadership in environmental advocacy groups have typically been very white. These have been very white male spaces. And as a result, maybe we have had policies or advocacy actions that reflect the leadership. And that doesn't necessarily reflect the work that's been done on the grassroots, the indigenous water protectors, the people who are out in their communities. Talk a little bit about that, about how we, I think, need to transform what we think of as environmental stewardship in this country so that everybody has a seat at the table.
Yes, as you were mentioning, I was just thinking of this analogy. When it's a white leader doing its advocacy, when it's an indigenous leader, it's a crime. And they're treated very differently, and we might be looking for the same. But yes, you're right. I mean, let's be honest and clear. The environmental, the conservation movement is deeply rooted in a lot of racism. And there's organizations are advancing, and they're putting pledges, and I mean, there's a lot of organizations that have done it in different moments, but I do believe that there's a momentum right now where they recognize that even for their own self-preservation, even to maintain their base of donors, they need to expand. And I think it's happening. It's slow, and for us to have for like, sometimes I talk about, I refer myself as sometimes I need to be the angry Latino in the room, that somebody who stands up and says the harsh truth, because it's important that we have those spaces, that we speak up, that we don't isolate. Like, yes, if we want to make those systemic changes, we need to have those tough conversations. And I'm always been very blessed to have been working with large organizations, federal agencies, nonprofits, advocacy groups. And the first thing that I tell them, that diversity, inclusion, justice do not come as a mandate from the board or from the signature from the executive director. It requires investments. It requires a lot of tough conversations, and it's stepping outside of your comfort zone. So we're doing that, and that's the role of Corazón Latino. We also want to raise the voices of those grassroots leaders that that want to see those changes. You mentioned that the youth is leading, and we want to empower them. We need to make sure that they have, and we're helping create those spaces. Last Sunday, we had this beautiful event where we launched Latino Conservation Week, which is a celebration of Latino and our commitment to protecting our Mother Earth, along with Hispanic Access Foundation. And we did it at an event in Rock Creek Park in the heart of Washington, D.C. And we had the leadership from the Department of Interior. We had the leadership from the National Park Service, from the Forest Service, from the White House. We had Chair Brenda Mallory in attendance. And those are the spaces where we can say, this is important. Talk to the community. Here's our community. They're gonna tell you, we're gonna have investment and follow what President Biden put out in his executive orders around environmental justice. It's not us, it's not the white leaders who are gonna make those decisions. It needs to be our communities. The communities that are affected who need to be making and helping guide those decisions. So again, I'm hopeful. There's a lot of that's happening. There's a lot of opportunity, but it needs to be both an investment from those who have the power to make decisions, and from the grassroots level, from our communities, to really step up to the plate. And if those spaces aren't open, demand that they are open. Make sure that they're doing. So that's what I see. And again, I'm very, very optimistic of this couple of months, couple of years that we have ahead of us.
And in terms of federal legislation, President Biden certainly is the polar opposite when it comes to his attitude to the climate crisis from his predecessor. But what are we seeing in action? I mean, so often legislation that tackles the impact of the climate crisis isn't always labeled so much climate legislation. You mentioned the infrastructure bill, transportation, healthcare, all of these have climate components. So what are the big pieces that you're paying attention to now that viewers could maybe pay attention to as well as they start to move forward in Congress?
I think there's two elements: infrastructure, what that investment looks like. If we want to do the same old model that it's not working, or do we want to really move into a more renewable and greener future? And the second one is protection and access to our public lands. That's one of the most important elements in our work, in our mission. It is the program. The Biden administration put it as America the Beautiful, that it's spearheaded by Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland, and it's really that 30% of our goals can be achieved through nature-based solutions. So, oceans, trees. I once attended a conference with former Vice President Gore, and he said Al Gore, and he said that the best technology to capture carbon dioxide is called a tree, and you scale that, and it's called a forest. So we want, and that's and it's not only creating those protected, but it's really making sure that those green spaces are there for our community. Nature is the healer. Nature is we are part of nature. So I mean, the pandemic connected us in a weird way to nature, because we couldn't interact with each other, we couldn't hug each other, but we had nature, we had trees, even at a city, even your little plant at home. That provided you some level of comfort, healing, mental health, and there's also all these medical reasons for us to be there. So infrastructure, and most important, that 30 by 30, protecting, protecting and caring for our public lands.
We'd love our viewers to weigh in, let us know where you're watching, and join this conversation on any of our social media platforms. But just as we finish up, Felipe, for people who may be involved at a local level with some type of environmental advocacy or stewardship, I mean, what do you want people to understand about the need to have equity in these spaces and to make sure that they are welcoming of everybody, particularly the most impacted communities?
So I do believe that the best way to drive climate action, climate conservation action, however you want to put it, it's collective impact. There's not one organization, not one solution, not one legislation is going to solve. We need everything, and everything counts. Stepping up on a town hall, voting, reducing your consumption of electricity, whatever it is that you can do it. And for me, what I always encourage folks, it's plant a tree. Planting a tree is such a powerful action, because you're investing in the future. You're doing it with hope. Hug those trees. Enjoy nature. Honor our motherland. Nature and our land is there for us. And ask guidance for your ancestors from all the knowledge that comes into you. That's how we're gonna change. So I do encourage folks that you start baby steps by, first of all, go and spend 20 minutes in nature, 20 minutes, all that it takes a day, and then move from there. And then hopefully you will participate and evaluate your elected officials, and that maybe you will support an organization like Corazón Latino, whatever it is, but start with those baby steps, because I think that's how we're gonna make a truly meaningful change on the long term.
Well, I know people can find out a lot more at the website for your group, corazonlatino.us. Thank you so much, Felipe, for being with us today. It's been a great conversation.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And hug a tree.
Hug a tree and plant a tree. Well, join us next week for the last show in the month of July. July is Disability Pride Month, and we're going to speak with a reporter who has written an article in The Nation magazine about the intersection of reproductive rights and disability rights, and how she says what's happening right now to Britney Spears is happening to countless other disabled adults in this country, and something needs to be done. That's next week, same time, same place, from Free Speech TV. Just Solutions.